Wow, what a couple of months of Doctor Who it has been. And you might wonder why I left my trans episode review for the show till weeks and weeks after the episode itself released. Surely it would have been more appropriate or proper to jump on the zeitgeist and tap into that immediate wave of people being interested, to which personally I was more interested in seeing if other stuff happened before I gave my take. And I also wanted time to consider it in the wider sense of the other trans stuff that has existed or been hinted towards in previous Doctor Who lore. Oh yeah, I am a huge Doctor Who nerd. I watched the whole thing multiple times through, the first time being when I was 11 years old, and it returned to our screens in 2005. So the specials, when they got announced, and when I saw Jodie Whittaker's 13th Doctor turn into David Tennant once more, was a pretty special moment for my childhood nostalgia.
I know these teeth.
Regardless of the fact that my own personal favourite Doctor is Peter Capaldi. Seriously, if you haven't watched 12th Doctor, you have missed out on the real highs of the renewal series.
Because it's not a game, Kate. This is a scale model of war. When you fire that first shot, no matter how right you feel, you have no idea who's going to die.
Regardless, now that the space has been given and the time has been taken, I thought it behooved me to come back and to re-examine this episode through that trans lens that I so love to use, and to see if Russell T Davies did in fact succeed in queering the series up like he was basically guaranteed to do. I mean, it's RTD. Have you seen the stuff he made during the hiatus from Doctor Who and before Doctor Who? Like, what was anybody expecting from him, to be honest? It's not like his original seasons of the show were also totally not jam-packed with gay people. But anyway, let's get into the Star Beast, the first of the 14th Doctor specials, and the one featuring the character we care about, Rose Noble. And for oncety once, we are doing a trans episode where the trans-ness is a central part of the episode. It's not an off-screen concept of trans identity. It's not a one-off mention of a trans joke or trans line. It's not a side trans character. It's not a main trans character. It's a trans character whose story and identity is interweaved into the narrative and becomes fundamental to the ending of the episode. That's always a big deal because it affords the most opportunity for the character to present ideas and to give the audience interpretations of our lives, especially important in the UK right now with the overwhelming public media that really likes to demonize and mock the trans community. Okay, I'm getting a little distracted and excited here because, come on, it's Doctor Who and Russell T Davies and Yasmin Finney and Catherine Tate and David Tennant. What the hell do you want from me? I'm a hardcore special interest fan of this show. This is exciting to get to talk about. The episode hits us hard and fast with Rose Noble from the beginning, showing her as a capable young woman who lives with her parents because she is still very much on that being a young person thing, and who can afford to not live with their parents these days, especially in London, due to the massive crisis that all young people are facing with standards of living costs rising and wages / job opportunities / stability not being able to keep up with that whatsoever. Has there been a Doctor Who episode about that one? Like, I can think of a few that sort of hint towards that anti-capitalist nature. but nothing explicitly comes to mind. Not what we're here to talk about today anyways. We're talking about Rose and her business of selling little alien doll things to people in Dubai.
She's got this business online. You should spend your evenings doing homework, not fiddling about posting things to Dubai.
And we kind of have to skip ahead a little bit because the episode decides to focus a whole bunch on this alien crashing into London and this character called the Doctor, I guess, who maybe is a big deal because they seem to really be at the forefront of everything that is happening. It's a little out of our purview, to be honest, but there is a tiny bit here when the Doctor is talking to Sean Temple, Rose's dad and also taxi driver, about how the Doctor uses his psychic paper to try and convince Sean that he can allow them to drive even though UNIT has closed all the roads. UNIT is like the British alien task force who have been around since the old show. And the Doctor says that he is the Grand Master of the knowledge. But the psychic paper apparently says that he is the Grand Mistress. To which the 14th Doctor, as this one is known, tells it to catch up. This is a reference, of course, for those that don't know, to the fact that the previous Doctor was a woman, the first woman Doctor. Although actually that isn't true, as the revelations during the 13th Doctor's stint revealed that there were a bunch of Doctors kind of before the first Doctor that we know of, the William Hartnell one, and that an evil Time Lord organisation wiped the Doctor's memory of these characters, such as the Fugitive Doctor from Fugitive of the Jadoon, a black woman.
Hello, I'm the Doctor. I'm a traveller in space and time.
What was I saying again before I got lost on the frankly strangely handled character development of the Chibnall era? Oh, right, yeah. There is an interesting dichotomy here of how the show addresses the fact that the Doctor was a woman for a bit, but doesn't necessarily treat it as that big of a deal, because the character doesn't, or didn't, or probably won't treat it like a massive deal. I'll talk more about that concept in a later chapter on how the Time Lords and the Doctors specifically engage with concepts of gender, but I just wanted to bring that up as a fun little hint towards a future topic that's sprinkled in the episode for us to, nibble on. Regardless, our next scene with Rose herself is when she is helping her mother move boxes into the house, and a bunch of boys cycle past and dead name her while making some pretty mean-spirited and, you know what, let's not mince words, let's say it, transphobic comments. They're fucking transphobic comments, alright? About her.
Alright, looking good, Jason. Well, give us a kiss, Jay boy.
In response to this, Rose clearly just wants to ignore it and pretend that this isn't happening. Pretty fair for a teenager who has gone through this sort of big change response and doesn't want to be confrontational or make herself more of a target. But Donna Noble? Now, Donna Noble is nothing if not a woman who will fight anybody, anytime, for anything. Especially anybody who has been a twat to people she loves.
Oh, get them. Is that Josie Wingate's boy?
Just leave it.
Well, I'm going to tell her.
Which is nice because in this scene and in her response, we see that Donna is a supportive parent, that she is willing to fight for her child and who her child is. It's nice because it shows us that thing that we learned from the entire season of Donna 15 years ago, which is that she is deep down a good person who let herself get beaten a little bit by the world, but once she is put in pressured circumstances to do the right thing, she will always pick that right option. A great example being the Pompeii episode, where she forced the Doctor to rescue just one family from the disaster, even though it's a fixed point in time.
You've got to go back! Doctor, I'm telling you, take this thing back!
Come with me.
She puts herself at risk for that. And Donna represents our working class character. She was never rich or well off or in a good position job-wise, and came from a family that was constantly struggling very visually to make ends meet. And I think it's good and important to show that working class people can be supportive and understanding in their own way of trans identity and trans people. Because a lot of propaganda from the liberal elites do like to paint bigots as these uneducated hicks whose bigotry is based in their own stupidity more than in anything else. An attitude which is toxic and doesn't reflect the realities of the situation. I've seen plenty of rich and educated people express incredibly shitty ideas about minorities, often done behind the guise of being polite and mannered and upper class, so that if you confront them on it, they act horrified and shocked by those accusations. While, for a personal example, I've had no issue with any of my very working class family when I came out, both of the times that I came out. Sure, they took some time getting the pronouns and the names right, but they put the effort in to do that because it was the nice thing to do. Now it's time for the unofficial motto of this rambling, tangent-distracted channel. We've got to get back to the episode. This scene continues with Donna and Sylvia, Donna's mother, talking about the alien stuff that happened in London, which Sylvia is deathly afraid of because of the fact that if Donna gets triggered by anything too alien, she might have all her memories of her time with the Doctor come back, and then she'll die. She will die. I maybe should have mentioned that for the people that don't know Doctor Who. At the end of the Donna series, she takes in all the information and mind of a Time Lord, the Doctor, to be able to help stop the Daleks becoming the Dr. Donna, which unfortunately is too much for her brain to handle, and so the Doctor has to wipe her mind of their adventures to make it so she doesn't die.
The power of the Time Lords into her mind at a terrible cost.
Binary.
She had to forget everything she ever knew.
She also, as this episode reminds us at the beginning, has a whole moment where she goes binary, which a lot of people just thought was her brain melting down, but maybe it's actually a reference to something that's going to play some sort of part in the narrative that we're building here, especially around Rose. I don't know, it's not like Russell T Davies loves to throw hints at the audience for ages, like Bad Wolf or something. So it's probably nothing really. I'm just making stuff up when you think about it.
I take the words. I scatter them in time and space.
We got off tangent already, but I'd like to promise that that will be the last detour from the episode story. I'd like to promise that, but we all know that isn't true at all, and that I will absolutely do it again, probably quite a few times. Either you love it, you don't care about it, or you hate it. And if you hate it, then honestly, maybe this channel isn't for you. It's okay for my video style to not be to your taste. I'm not trying to make something here that appeals to everyone. That would be crazy. I'm making it to appeal to the kind of people that want to watch what I make. Back on episode and scene, Sylvia tells Rose that she looks gorgeous, #affirming Grandma Sylvia, and Donna tells Rose that she would burn the world down for her, and specifically drops this frankly baller as fuck line.
I would burn down the world for you, darling. Anyone has a go, I will be there, and I will descend.
Can we get that printed on a shirt with a trans flag or something? Because that is pretty damn cool. This whole thing, though, leads to Sylvia asking if something was wrong, because this kind of statement normally comes out from something shitty happening, and you needing to confirm to your child that you would defend them from any of that shit. And that question leads to Donna and Sylvia talking about the whole scene before with the boys, and we get a bit where Sylvia is clearly wanting to be positive and good, but is worried that her actions might come across as trying too hard, specifically worried that calling Rose gorgeous is maybe being seen as sexist because she wouldn't have called Rose gorgeous before the transition. And Donna just tells her mum that she needs to stop worrying about it and that it's all fine. They both talk about how they get clumsy around the transitioning stuff, but there is no sudden finger waving at the characters here. There is no descent of a character from on high to tell them off, because what we are seeing here is two characters who do clearly care about Rose, who are trying to be good and trying to recognize that they are flawed and make mistakes around the transitioning stuff, and in that they are being introspective and learning to be better from their clumsiness. This isn't a scene of condemnation, because the message that RTD is sending here is that this is the right attitude for people to have. That this is the approach that you should take if you are a family member or a friend of a trans person.
Does she look gorgeous? Yes. Well, stop worrying.
I just get so clumsy.
I know. So do I.
It's okay to acknowledge that maybe you are not doing the best with it and are being unsure about what to say, but that you need to take that as a sign to improve, not as a justification to remain stationary in the language that you use around that person. An additional important point here is how different Sylvia is in this scene compared to what we knew of her from 15 years ago. She was always a really difficult mother, and we saw a lot how she put Donna down and made Donna feel small and insignificant, constantly reminding Donna of their place as working class people who are not allowed higher ambitions, and that Donna is just another failure in a line of failures. Her attitude there came most from this clear sense of her own inadequacies, that she too felt the same way about herself, and it led to a very toxic relationship that was best explored in the alternate timeline episode Turn Left, wherein Donna, listening to her mother telling her to settle for lesser, leads to the universe getting fucked up and the UK turning into a fascist nation that locks immigrants into camps to clear housing up. Is this meant to be fantasy? That seems pretty realistic. Seriously though, it is a fantastic episode that often gets overlooked in the grand scheme of things, but this character, who evolved over the course of the season with Donna, who came to understand how vital the Doctor was in developing Donna into this better or greater person, we get to see now how she is more affirming of the people in her life, that she is more kind and attempting to uplift them. She got her shit together and is helping to look after Donna after Donna lost her job and gave away all the money she won from the lotto ticket the Doctor gave her for her wedding day at the end of David Tennant's original run.
A lottery ticket? What a cheap present.
This family is complex and has its difficulties, not least money, but there is genuine caring here, and love too, something which translates to their acceptance and support of Rose. A good family accepts their trans child. Our storyline we care about, though, continues with Rose getting a little bit of an E.T. moment, where she meets the Meep and brings it back to her work shed because it is on the run from monsters and very scared. And it's very clear at this point that the Meep is a bad person. Like, not to spoil the episode in this video talking about the episode, but the Meep really gave off the vibes of being way too cute and kind for it to be anything but an act, because that sort of stuff keeps happening in Doctor Who. Oftentimes the visually scariest monsters are actually not that bad, and the cutest, adorable little things are horrifying abominations that need to be thrown into a black hole. No, wait, that's what happened to the literal devil. Forget I said that. And we get some more scene stuff with the Doctor, whoever the fuck that character is, am I right? Talking about how there used to be a woman, and a Scotsman, if you can believe such a thing to be true, before also showing that the Doctor refers to Rose Noble as Donna's beautiful daughter, because this is his best friend, and why wouldn't the Time Lords be gender affirming for trans people, considering the entirety of the gender fucky history of that species? Something that I promised to get into in its own time and space, so let's put a clamp on that conversation for now. Rose kind of bonds with the Meep, continuing the E.T. vibe that I got earlier from it, though when Rose talks about how she understands the feeling of being all alone, that she sometimes feels like she is from a different planet, a sense of standing out from the crowd that probably has something to do with a big sci-fi future revelation in like 20 minutes time or something, but also relates in some way to the trans stuff too, to the gender elements that are quite hard for cisgender people to understand and might almost seem alien in the way that they challenge what are assumed established truths about the universe to those kind of people. The Meep, however, tries to interject and make this into a comment about Rose being lonely, and that now she has the Meep, so she doesn't have to be lonely anymore, which is some dependency bullshit that absolutely works into that whole evil vibe I'm getting, especially with how Rose pushes back against that idea by saying that she isn't lonely, just different.
You sound lonely.
No, just different.
Now you have the Meep.
Her being this outsider is not a bad thing or a negative experience necessarily. It's not something that sets her apart in a way that the audience should feel pity towards Rose for. It's just part of the character that she has developed and the life that she has lived without being an indictment. A frankly pretty good message that I think probably comes from that whole Russell T Davies is a gay man who has spent a lot of time with trans people and writing queer stories since like day one 35 years ago, and he has a trans woman playing the trans character to lend her own authentic voice and experience to the role. Oh yeah, I mentioned earlier Rose is played by Yasmin Finney, who is transgender. Normally, I'd leave that for its own chapter where I explain why that's a good thing, but I mean, honestly, I basically just covered the benefits of it right there. There are, of course, more societal and audience-based advantages to that sort of casting choice that I have talked about in the past. Stuff like it not falling into the trap of portraying trans women as men in dress by having a man dress up in a dress to play one, to it giving a trans person the chance to perform in a popular series and show and increase their profile, open up the door for more casting directors to cast trans people and get their profiles as well into the wider public. and to expand the celebrity voices that many people consume as their only real insight into the trans community. So the more, the better. Stuff like that. Anyway, Donna discovers the Meep and freaks out about the aliens, and the Doctor shows up, and Sylvia freaks out about Donna seeing the Doctor and then remembering and dying, and everyone is shouting and losing it, and then Sean gets back home to this complete nightmare of a moment, and it's a pretty funny scene. The complex confusion undercut by Sean's comment focusing on a simple and very normal thing, such as the food that smells good.
Hey, Dad's home. Something smells nice.
Tuna madras.
None of that has anything to do with the trans stuff. Honestly, I just think it's a really great piece of comedy that I liked and helps to sell the family fun of the Doctor Who show to people. And of course, this scene continues with a bunch of irrelevant plot stuff, whatever the hell that means, but more to our tastes, with Rose telling the Doctor that he is just assuming that the Meep uses he/him pronouns, to which the Doctor says that, yeah, that's actually a good point, and he should ask the Meep what the Meep uses. Now, some people might jump on this as more gender, culture, wars bullshit. But in this case, it really isn't. Sure, Rose bringing it up might be seen like that, but the Meep is an alien. We have no idea what their cultural norms around gender or pronouns or identity might be, and it's flat out weird to apply our very human, very Christian, and very Western version of gendered cultural norms to a species whose information we know nothing about.
You're assuming he as a pronoun.
True. Yes, sorry, good point.
Meep.
I actually have a video talking about that here, where I more specifically focus on the fact that these aliens and the different versions of what we are used to are not a transgender thing automatically, because transgender identity holds a very specific place/comment within how we view gender, in that it is effectively a requirement to in some way subvert or move through the normalized versions of gender that your culture or species utilizes. And so for an alien, what we consider transgender would be different again based on how they handle that. But exploring these differences in approach can be helpful to get people to see gender not as this ironclad and uniform approach, but something that truly does evolve and change massively from location to location and group to group, even within the human species. There are tons of cultures who had such variance and complexity to genders before colonial Christianity came along and removed it.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
In regards to the Meep, we discover that the Meep uses the definitive article, the Meep, much like the Doctor, though the Doctor does also accept whatever pronouns are currently the ones that people would use for the form they embody at that time. I think it's kind of a gender fluid-ish thing that we will talk about more in the Doctor chapter. Get out of here, you damn main character. This isn't the Doctor's chapter. This is Rose Noble's moment/episode/chapter, okay? And so, there we go. It was useful to confirm the Meep's pronoun usage because it helps us understand a little bit about how the Meep sees the Meep and approaches the Meep's gender identity.
My chosen pronoun is the definite article. I am always the Meep.
Oh, I do that.
Then a bunch of warriors attack. The warriors that the Meep is running from, as the Meep claimed that the Meep species was kept as livestock due to the Meep's fur, but then the galaxy banned fur trading or fur production or whatever because it was unethical, and so the RAF wiped out all the meeps because the meeps were no longer valuable. Also, just from now on, when I use they to refer to the meep, I'm not referring to this definitive singular one, I'll still call that the meep, but to the entirety of the species, because I've got to cut down on how often I'm using the word meep in this video. It's too much. A bunch of stuff happens. There are RAF warriors fighting these human soldiers from UNIT who've been possessed by something in the craft the meep landed in, which I am totally sure doesn't provide more fuel to that fire I've been starting and stoking, that the meep is totally an evil little bastard who is lying about the meep's backstory to win sympathy points from the Doctor and co. However, the Doctor is clearly suspicious as well, as I am, as they all drive away in Sean's taxi. Suspicious that they have things completely wrong after he checked the pulse of one of the dead UNIT soldiers. Or was the UNIT soldier actually dead? See, this scene is now the twist reveal occurring as the Doctor begins an impromptu court session under the auspices of the Shadow Proclamation, a piece of sci-fi jargon that gets brought up every damn time they need to kind of vaguely reference some sort of galactic law.
So go on then. What is the Shadow Proclamation anyway?
Posh name for police. Outer space police.
And the RAF warriors give their side of the story, that the meep species existed under a living sun that one day went mad and then infected all of the meep with its madness, and so the meep with this solar psychedelia, or whatever words they use to justify the villain of the week this time.
Their planet basked in the light of a living sun until one terrible day, the sun went mad.
A psychedelic sun.
The meep, singular, of course, defense against all of this is to pull out a gun and shoot and kill the RAF warriors, declaring themselves to be the beep of all the meeps, summoning the army of possessed soldiers. Donna's suspicions, and my suspicions, and the Doctor's suspicions, that the meep was actually maybe a monster, are now definitely confirmed. Though there is a fact here that's not actually really explored in the episode that I want to mention, that the meep just gets fucked up at the end and captured, but also that the meep were clearly not always bad people. The meep were okay in the story until the evil sun possessed them and turned them into monsters. So, shouldn't the Doctor do something about fixing this solar psychedelia to try and save the last meep, the beep of all the meeps, from remaining insane forever against their will? I mean, the Doctor doesn't do that, and the episode doesn't really address that point, but it was just something that stuck out to me in my watch party when we first saw the episode. Regardless, even worse than the revelation that the meep kills and eats people, and the meep murdered these two good guy law enforcement aliens, is the fact that the meep calls Rose a weird child.
You stupid woman with your weird child!
Oh, don't you dare!
Like, fuck you, meep. Fuck you and your bullying attitude, you star-possessed creature who is possibly trapped in the mania caused by that sun. Okay, it's hard to really be upset at the meep due to that facet, but the bullying that isn't explicitly transphobic from the meep, but sure feels like it's transphobic, is certainly not okay in my books, alright? Solar psychedelia is no excuse for transphobia, meep. Watch yourself. We get closer and closer here in these scenes to Donna remembering who the Doctor is, and giving us some kind of finale to the story. As the Doctor discovers while they are captured by the meep, that Donna gave away all the money to help people out there who are in danger and pain and fear, inspired by some kind of person that she can't remember anymore to do that. The barriers are breaking down, but this whole thing is brought up because Donna is lamenting the fact that she could have kept her family far away from here, that she could have kept Rose safe if only she hadn't been a good person.
We could be living somewhere far away from here, and you'd be safe, Rose. It's all my fault.
Which continues to show, I think, how protective Donna is of her child. A protectiveness that I think is amplified for supportive parents when your child has an identity that is often used to attack or make their lives harder. Like, parents in the UK have to face the overwhelming government and media shitstorm around trans rights that comes down on their child's health and well-being. Have to see the news stories about trans people being beaten up and verbally assaulted for being trans. Have to read about people like Brianna Gay, where sure, the court found that it wasn't a hate crime, but the kids sure used trans targeting language while they were, killing a 16-year-old trans person who they knew was trans. So, I don't know, maybe it was a hate crime. It's pretty fucked up shit regardless. And I imagine you have to see all of that and fear and worry about your own trans child and how the world might treat them because of this panic around their identity caused by people who refuse to see the humanity and real people at the center of the shitstorm. I would imagine a lot of supportive and positive parents of trans children can see themselves reflected in the way that Donna interacts around Rose. This super defensive and super involved in trying to give her the best life attitude that is taken to an extreme because of the extra difficulties that Rose faces due to how society and shitty people engage with who she is.
That's what happens. You have a kid, you think, good, I've got it, that's mine. And then she grows up into this extraordinary, beautiful thing.
Anyway, the story progresses more. The Meep is going to activate the Meep ship, which will basically fucking destroy London to power its engine, despite the fact that the Doctor attempts to offer an alternative option to getting off the planet, because the Meep is an evil villainy thing, and that's now the identity that the Meep will be expressing from here until the end of the episode, okay? They're just a bad person. The Doctor runs off to try and stop this dagger drive from happening, and Donna goes with him, remembering more and more elements, such as the Doctor's name now, while telling Sean to get out of London with Rose and keep Rose safe.
I love you, darling. I'm sorry.
Donna, you can't.
Take her 10 miles away.
There's a big whole dramatic scene as the Doctor has to give Donna her memories back to be able to stop the Meep, knowing full well that doing so will kill her, and he gets all sad and mopey and annoyed about it. The whole thing here feeling like kind of a reference to that scene with Wilfred Mott way back in the Time Lord Victorious arc, where the Doctor has to save Wilf by killing himself, but this time he has to kill Donna to save 9 million people. And together they stop the ship. But oh no, Donna starts dying again because of that everything we've just talked about, and the Doctor is real sad about it, and the soldiers are still being controlled by the psychedelic sun thing, so they're about to shoot the Doctor when suddenly a bunch of stuff starts happening, and Donna wakes up, and everyone is confused, because just what the hell's going on here? Before we see that Rose is saying a bunch of sci-fi jargon and saving the day by de-psychedelic sunning the soldiers.
But Light wave emanators and transferring excess power to the broken dome prefixulator.
What the hell's going on here? You might still be asking. And things are going to get a little confusing at this point, okay. So, it turns out that having Rose allowed Donna to pass some of the Meta-Crisis Time Lord energy to a different person, to split that energy in a way that would allow them to not be immediately killed by it, and that Rose was influenced by that Time Lord Meta-Crisis energy in some way throughout her life, as she took the name Rose when she transitioned, Rose being a major favourite of David Tennant Doctor. She did all her work in a shed that looked like a TARDIS, and all the little dolls that she was making were replications of creatures the Doctor had fought or spent time with during his adventures. And the scene does this comparison thing between when Donna said binary, 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 which I mentioned earlier because the show hinted at it earlier. Remember that? Remember, like 30 minutes ago when that happened? Well, Donna says binary again, and in response, Rose says non-binary. And the Doctor confirms that Rose is not binary because she has this Meta-Crisis Doctor energy inside her, and the Doctor is both male and female and neither and none with regards to gender, because who the Doctor is as a concept or person exists to quite a degree separate from the body they currently occupy as an identity. Now, this whole thing is sort of confusing. And at first, I was mostly worried that what it was doing was saying that Rose transitioning was specifically because of this Meta-Crisis energy. That she wasn't really transgender because of dysphoria or her own coming to terms with her gender identity, but due to some random ass alien sci-fi shit that was influencing her. Much like a sun might influence a bunch of cute little creatures into eating a galactic council. And that would really undercut the whole message and the whole point of putting a transgender person into an episode and making their transness a center point. Like, having it be explained away as external forces influencing a character is a pretty bad handling.
We're binary.
She's not, because the Doctor's
male
and female.
And neither. And more.
A few scenes down the line, after the Meep has been arrested and sent to prison for 10,000 years to atone for crimes that realistically the Meep wasn't responsible for because of that whole being controlled by a mad sun. God, it feels like they really dropped the ball on that one. If you ever watch this video, Russell T Davies, I hope you do, please just explain to me what happened there, alright? Because that seems very much like you brought up some lore explanation stuff around the Meep and then didn't follow through on its ramifications to a satisfactory end. Anyway, the Doctor says that we still gotta deal with this Meta-Crisis. Like it's slowed down because of the splitting between Rose and Donna, but it's still gonna be a long-term problem, to which Donna and Rose both explain that they know everything, and they know exactly what to do. If only the Doctor was still a woman or woman presenting, then he would be able to understand that there's an obvious way of getting rid of this power, an obvious way that no male presenting Time Lord could possibly get, which is that Rose and Donna can just let the Meta-Crisis go.
We choose to let it go.
They can just drop the plot device that made for a very messy end to season 4 and a very terrible departure for a companion back in the day that upset a bunch of people, myself included, because watching Donna beg to not have her memory erased against her will was some fucked up shit.
No, 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 please, please, no, 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 no!
And Anna, do you taste that in the back of your throat? the bile of Russell T Davies sort of messing this ending up, because what we have here is not a very cool queer message to present. Just because the Doctor is currently male presenting, whatever the fuck that means for the Doctors and Time Lords, and in the Doctor's case, they're an alien who exists as a bunch of different genders all at once, sort of, because of all their past lives, including the timeless child past lives at this point, which means it numbers in the hundreds. It's weird and almost biologically essentialist to say that the Doctor can't understand this solution because he isn't currently occupying the body of a woman. Like, having a woman's body or brain, or whatever the fuck is being said here, is key to being able to let things go.
It's a shame you're not a woman anymore. She'd have understood.
Something a male-presenting Time Lord will never understand.
I mean, it's also super silly, because when the Doctor was a woman, she was just as obsessed and hyperfixated as any of the Doctors are. Because Jodie Whittaker knew how to play a Doctor. In fact, the Doctor, famous for saying, "Doctor, I let you go," when they regenerated, was my personal favourite Doctor again. Peter Capaldi, 12th Doctor, a male-presenting Doctor.
Doctor, I let you go.
This whole thing is a really stupid series of lines that feels like it's trying to be female empowerment, but just comes across as vastly failing to understand the direction we should be moving with the Doctor and gender, where their gender identity doesn't and isn't defined necessarily by the body they are currently in. That message is the transgender message too, you fucking idiots. And they sort of negate it while softening the blow by including Rose in this message about how only women could get this. Because, I mean, thank God at least they present Rose as a real woman, right? With a real woman's body, which is, hooray, positive, but wrapped in a very negative connotation towards biology targeted at the Doctor. I don't know. The whole thing here just rubbed me wrong. But the scene also has a bit at the end where Rose confirms that she can now finally really just be herself. And being herself does still mean being transgender. So the meta-crisis stuff was not the influence or the cause behind her gender identity, which is a pretty important save for that potentially dangerous conclusion. And the episode ends with Donna going into the TARDIS with the Doctor, talking to him about how he seems like he has run ragged and on the edge of collapsing, and what the hell happened while he was gone for the past 15 years, and also that he could just settle down and become part of the noble family. You know, slow down, you know?
You can do things different this time. So why don't you do something completely new and have some friends?
If it's no trouble.
There's a place set for you.
But you didn't know I was coming. Why would you set me a place?
Oh, because we always do.
Donna pours coffee into the TARDIS and it freaks the fuck out and flies off into time and space to get them to the next special episode of Wild Blue Yonder.
What's gonna go wrong? Oh my God, that's
Now, I'm not gonna do a big conclusion thing for this episode right now, because I've sort of said all the pieces and elements that I needed to during my commentary of it. If you haven't got my opinions, then how have you got to this point? But I took time on this because I wanted to see if more stuff with Rose would pan out through the other specials, and if there would be more trans elements. And there really were not around Rose, at least, so we can kind of call it there. I don't have to spoil or dive into what happens in the Wild Blue Yonder or the Giggle, because there is no trans stuff to build around. And also because, frankly, those are really, really good episodes of Doctor Who, and you should absolutely go and watch them for yourself if I have in any way enticed you with my comments about the show here. Seriously, it's it's a really good time right now to get into Doctor Who, with the 15th Doctor coming out and the soft reset with a season 1 dropping and some hopefully fresh storylines divorced from all the previously super heavy and dense lore that was dragging the show down a bit. And yet, we're not quite done here, because there are 2 more things that are transgender within the new Doctor Who series, by which I mean the stuff from 2005 onwards, after that period when Doctor Who died really badly in the ratings and just went off the air for like 15 years in the 90s, post the 7th Doctor and the movie with Paul McGann.
Yes! What? These shoes! They fit perfectly. Yes.
And I wanted to focus here on just the new Who stuff, because realistically, what this is now isn't just a Doctor Who trans episode. It's more of an exploration of Russell T Davies' influence on the series towards putting in transgender or queer characters, as both of these instances I want to talk about are from under his stewardship. Honestly, Moffat and Chibnall were very lackluster on the inclusion of queer characters, or of the writing them in a way that gave them a decent involvement or any kind of serious exposure. Like, I am still caught up on both Moffat's gay Christian Papal mainframe couple, who literally described themselves as the fat one and the thin one before the fat one got his head chopped off by evil monks. Hooray! Rough time for gay people. And on Chibnall's failure to flesh Yasmin Khan out as a character also really give us the fans, i.e. me, the proper exploration of any sort of lesbian romance between Yaz and the 13th Doctor, instead playing a little game I like to call queerbaiting.
Can we just live in the present of what we have while we still have it? Sure.
Just some serious failings all around that were much more noticeable when Russell T Davies wasn't there. Like, he had his issues, but he could certainly do queer better than those other 2 fuckers. I just remembered Bill Potts and the lesbian pilot chick and the whole brutal Cyberman death thing. Oh, Moffat, why do you do this? But what I wanted to say here was that this video is now really a focus on RTD, but I didn't want to get bogged down in trans stuff from either old Who or the extended universe like Torchwood, because I want to give those shows and those periods their own videos down the line and really hone in on them, instead sticking to a specific thesis for this video. I'm trying a new thing here called showing restraint, okay? Something that I'm maybe not super famous for, but shut up. On the note of restraint, let's talk about what the fuck these other 2 random trans inclusions were, alright? Maybe there's something there to build our case about this episode.
Now, the first one is a very famous one amongst Doctor Who fans, and is completely unknown by anyone who is just casually involved in watching the series, because the entirety of its canonicity is built on a singular line, if you only watch the shows, said by the character, Cassandra, a piece of human flesh stretched out on a rack to maintain her purity and beauty, compared to the mutants that she viewed all the modern humans in this distant future to be. She was a major villain in the 2nd episode of the 1st season in 2005, back when Eccleston was wearing the Doctor face, and was part of an episode designed to show Rose, not Rose Noble, but Rose Tyler, the first of many women who would be the audience surrogate for seeing the world and mystery and intrigue of the Doctor and the wider universe through.
Run. Welcome aboard, Miss Jones!
Where do you want to start?
Doctor Who.
No, just the doctor.
Yes.
I'll see you at 6 p.m.
What the hell are you doing?
Well, this episode was meant to give Rose and us this initial view into the wild and wacky sci-fi that exists, the future, with all the alien species and variants billions of years can do when the Earth is about to die to the sun. It also gives Rose a momentary panic attack because she comes to terms with the fact that everyone she knows has been dead for so long that nobody alive remembers, which is an overwhelming concept to have to come to terms with, to be fair.
She's dead now. 5 billion years later, my mum's dead.
In the episode, the announcer mentions for genders a variety of options dependent upon their species and what they use, and states this specifically about the gathering.
Ladies and gentlemen, and trees and multiforms.
Now, yes again, this isn't transgender, but what it does lean into is understanding the galaxy in a way that is not necessarily through the lens of the Western Christian gender binary that we have become accustomed to seeing as the dominant way the universe works or should be seen as. When people see aliens, they try to categorize them as male and female. I mean, heck, people referred to the trees in this episode as male trees and women trees because of how they looked. One looks more feminine than the other two, even though it is clearly stated that their gender is trees. They are tree, like Groot.
And now might I introduce the next honoured guest, representing the forest of Cheam. We have trees.
Anyways, the one line that we are here for comes a bit later, when Rose and Cassandra are talking to each other, and Cassandra reveals her eugenicsy, ethnic purity ideology, as she states that she calls herself the last human because she doesn't view the other humans as really human due to the fact that they spread out across the stars and tainted themselves. Which, I mean, it's a bit fucked up, but it's fine because she is the villain of the episode, so you know, screw her, what she thinks is bad. But the line is at the start of that scene, when she indicates where she used to live on the Earth when she was a little boy.
That's where I used to live when I was a little boy, down there.
And that's it. It's not challenged or brought up ever again. It's literally just something that she says as a throwaway line, but honestly, it being a throwaway line that isn't turned into a big deal, isn't turned into something, is actually pretty reassuring. Her transness doesn't play a part of her villainy, it doesn't play a part of her characterization, it doesn't factor into the obsession with surgeries and why she turned herself into a slab of skin on a rack to keep herself alive for this long. It's just something casually mentioned that is part of her history, but doesn't necessarily hold narrative weight, and you can easily miss it if you're not paying attention. Unfortunately though, for the people who watched the episode and didn't bother reading the lives of the rich and the thin, that's right, you thought this wasn't gonna go off the rails and have me digging into random obscure BBC spin-off books. You know, I said I'd focus on the New Who series, but if a character is in the New Who series and has a book about them, I kinda gotta read the book to see if there's any trans stuff in there. But for the people who didn't read that book and wanted to not believe that a trans person was in their Doctor Who, they could interpret this singular line as just being a silly comment, you know? Like that song by the Black Kids, I'm not gonna teach your boyfriend how to dance with you, where the lead singer says this line, but it's just an inside joke from childhood with his sister and not a trans thing at all. Just a funny little gender comment. However, with Cassandra in this first book in the Monsters and Villains supplementary series, it is literally reconfirmed that she transitioned in some form. That such a thing was almost the only true part of her backstory. The rest of it being completely made up, as she never had rich parents, she married rich a bunch of times, and the people she married mysteriously died and left her all of their fortune. And she changed names each and every time to keep running away from her crime past. There is some confusing stuff in this book, though, that does complicate any potential positive nature of the transness here. Specifically, that it seems like Cassandra was also still appearing as her dead name pre-transition gender person occasionally, but that when that dead name person bombed in a musical biopic and then proceeded to murder a bunch of critics / 2 surgeons, that dead name never appeared again and it was just Cassandra from that point. The whole thing developed here, while confirming the transness, does mix it up as well, and make it seem as if the transitioning was part of a villainous purpose to escape crimes, and to also lure men in and marry them and exploit them. And oh no, that's Lois Einhorn from Ace Ventura. Surely this isn't as bad as that. It leans a little in that direction, alright, and it certainly could be taken that way, but I think the vagary of the terms here is enough that interpretation is king. Ultimately, the only hard thing we can say is that Cassandra definitely transitioned, for whatever purpose or reason we cannot explicitly confirm, but I'm not gonna call it positive because there are a lot of pointers towards some pretty negative versions of transitioning here and villainy that might play a part of being trans. Bit weak, Russell T Davies. Maybe this is the kind of hinting towards the awkwardly handled gender stuff in the Star Beast episode that we were looking for. Like, sure, he's a gay man and writes queer stories a bunch, but that doesn't make him perfect, or somebody without criticism about his queer stories. This is sort of what I was looking for. The other trans thing is from the super recent Christmas special, The Church on Ruby Road, the first Sutigatwa showing with the new companion, Ruby Sunday, and the trans character here is not a main character, and isn't even definitively confirmed as being trans by the episode. It's just a person with a non-conventional voice, something that I personally vibe with quite a bit.
Right, I said sorry, okay?
Can you do Gaudete?
Can we do what?
Who happened to trigger my transdar when I was watching the episode, and then I looked into it and found out they were played by Mary Malone, a trans actress who also starred in Abigail Thorne's The Prince.
I'll find you. You look out for me next time and we will go together.
Huh. Didn't expect to mention Philosophy Tube in this video on Doctor Who, but here we are. And there she is. Weird world. But the inclusion of Mary Malone as Trudy really helps to solidify this theme that Russell T Davies is absolutely going to keep putting queer people into this new series, and is just gonna chuck them in as characters who get to be characters without having to justify themselves or explain their queerness to the audience. A trans woman can just be and hang out with her girlfriends and get to be part of the girl talk and be a girl because that is the message. Honestly, this one is the most positive of all the RTD stuff so far because it's the one that least affords him an opportunity to mess up the gender politics stuff, but also because it offers the audience the most inclusive version of a trans character played by a trans woman. Trudy just is and exists, and that's it. Get used to it. And it's good to have multiple types, right? It's good to have an episode about trans people and then just trans characters. And it's been confirmed that Rose Noble will be returning in some capacity for the next season of Doctor Who, awkwardly retitled Season 1, which means we now have 3 Season 1s. But at the end of the day, I mostly like to view those as just different points to jump into the series if that's how you're feeling it. And I think that confirmation of her returning and this Christmas episode bodes well for Doctor Who and future trans inclusion, because the message here that I want you to learn is that you have to keep doing it. You have to keep putting in different and new trans people, you have to keep doing different storylines and different character introductions with them to break that monolithic version that audiences have of our community. When I criticise Russell T Davies here, and when I criticise any creator, it's not to say that they need to not put trans people in their works ever again. It's to try and point out ways it can be done better. Because I want more. I want more variety, so that everybody in the community can see bits of who they are reflected on the screen, and everybody outside of the community can get some more experience with ideas of people that are transgender. Win-win as far as I'm concerned, if that is where the Doctor Who show is heading.
And then just to make it worse, Bobby McGee asked you out.
Now, for a bunch of this video, I kept putting off the Doctor conversation, because I wanted to do it justice in its own chapter. And frankly, it's actually kind of a difficult one, because I really have to accentuate right here at the start that this isn't anything transgender inherently. I may have lied a little bit by seeming as if this whole thing would be a big chapter and deep dive into the Doctor as a character, as gender goals, or whatever the hell you think it is, because that absolutely isn't what this is going to be. It's going to be a smaller piece, just sort of going over the place that the Doctor can hold for people and what the Doctor does or doesn't do for transgender representation. See, what this all boils down to is what the Doctor represents, right? Like, representation is almost entirely derived from how an audience perceives what a character is meant to represent. If you have a trans character, but who never interacts with, never engages with, never comes across as, or in any way, shape or form indicates to the audience that they are trans, then a large amount of the audience will not see that character as transgender representation. But it's this kind of flexibility to art and creation, the power that the audience holds upon the work, that does allow for characters who were not intended to necessarily be something transgender to end up getting adopted by the trans community for that. An example of this that's not necessarily trans is Buffy and Faith in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, becoming icons to lesbian groups due to their status as powerful women with metaphorical allegories and relationship that could be taken as sapphic attraction.
Hey girlfriend, bad time?
With the Doctor, we have to align two truths about the character together. The first of which is that they are an alien whose concept of gender and whose own connection to gender is different to our human one, even if they might appear as human for the majority of their screen time. That appearance as human is a deceptive element that plays some part of the second truth we will get into, but the alienness of the Doctor, which does occasionally vary from incarnation to incarnation depending on showrunner and actor. The Colin Baker and Peter Capaldi Doctors are far more removed from humanity and acted in a way that lent the Doctor an alien gap of distance compared to doctors like Peter Davison or David Tennant's. But this alienness connects to gender in an in-universe, canon, lore sense, because what it means is that the Doctor's flexibility around how they present themselves and flexibility around how they connect to gender markers or indices, which is very reminiscent of the Time Lords in general, is not gender fluid, or transgender, or genderqueer in the human sense that we would understand it. As Time Lord society is one that is built around characters swapping bodies and genders freely.
Operation in progress. Are you alright, sir? Sorry, ma'am.
Back to normal, am I? The only time I've been a man, that last body.
Sometimes on a whim, if we are to believe what happened with Romana and Romana 2. Oh god, I know I wasn't going to talk about the old series to try and keep this somewhat on track, but it is interesting that compared to the Doctor's changing form when they get fucked up by something and killed or dying, we see Romana swap bodies because she is bored and wants to try something different. Some people have, potentially fairly, written that off as a sexist representation of a female-presenting Time Lord. But I personally like to see it as how maybe a lot of the Time Lords who are not constantly in danger and fighting for their lives approach regeneration. Like it's almost as if you are changing clothes, but instead you are changing your face and body. You don't need to get shot to do it, you can just do it.
I thought it looked very nice on the princess.
But you can't go around wearing copies of bodies.
Why not? We're not going back to actress, are we?
No!
Well then.
All of this, though, feeds that concept of how Time Lords are different to humans. They do things differently when it comes to gender and when it comes to how they engage with it. And so it's silly or difficult to try and apply our human perception of transgender identity to this species. However, that brings us to our second truth, which is that you totally can apply our human idea of transgender identity to this species and use it to relate back to your own connection with gender or to an exploration of gender from our perspectives. What the hell am I talking about? Those two truths literally contradict one another and are at odds. And the fact is that they kind of are but kind of are not. I made that distinction earlier between intent and as written lore and audience interpretation / participation because it plays a huge role in how both of these things are right and need to be considered at the same time. The Doctor can be not a trans thing, and the Time Lord's version of gender is not gender fluid or gender queer or transgender either within universe because their version of gender is different to ours. But if the audience member who perceives and interprets those representations and discussions around gender, who watches these characters swap gender roles quickly and simply with no real hassle or concern around it, a audience member who notices a society that is not so rigidly structured in its binary essentialism, and if that audience member then uses all of that information to build their own journey or identify aspects of themselves within that representation that become a transgender thing, if only for that person, then it becomes a transgender thing for that person and the others that might agree with them. Truth is relative and subjective in art. It's a flexible and moulded concept between the various external forces that engage with it. And so many things can be right at the same time. Many people can have different views on the Doctor, can have different ways that they connect with what the Doctor means to them personally, and they can all be right, insofar as the term right holds any meaning in this sort of conversation. That bit of the video got very much like one of the essays I would write for my university. So I hope it made sense and that it relayed what I wanted to relay about the Doctor and the Time Lords without getting too dense or sociology wanky. At the end of the day, they can be a trans thing if you want them to be a trans thing, even if they are not a trans thing within the universe of the show, because lore and canon and in-universe makes up only one small part of the vast sea of what art means to an audience. And don't let people actually you about that. Just tell them to fuck off. With all that said, that's the trans stuff from New Who. It was a pretty good episode, with some dodgy spots. There was an interesting earlier attempt at a trans character from Russell T Davies that had some dodgy spots in the expanded book lore and also possibly in the interpretation of the episode. You know, trans person, obsession with surgeries. There was another trans character in the Christmas special, which hopefully implies that RTD is going to keep this new series of Doctor Who just getting progressively queerer and queerer, which is great, if only because it vastly upsets the kind of people who make those shitty, complaining YouTube videos that repeat the same point over and over for about 20 minutes to get the ad money and contain the word woke in the title and thumbnail. Like, yeah, that's a petty and silly thing to want media to do, just annoy bigots, but I've never claimed that I wasn't petty and silly. In fact, being petty and silly is a pretty major part of my brand. So generally, thumbs up for Russell T Davies and Doctor Who here, and the knowledge that even if it's messy, they will at least keep trying to improve on it and doing more representation to give us options is a good thing. That's sort of a conclusion, I guess. I can't really remember what my thesis statement at the start of this video was, except for I like Doctor Who and I want to talk about it a bunch, and this video and the style gives me an excuse to do that on my channel. If you enjoyed what I said, or learnt something, or just liked my voice, then that's great, and please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, or commenting to feed the algorithm that defines whether I get to feel good about myself or not on the day that I release the video. That is a joke. I only get mildly depressed when videos don't perform well, okay? I realise that if I like it or not is a bigger deal. If you really, really liked what I did and want to help support me and my cat and the channel and the cat, did I mention the cat? Yeah, I got a cat. I've written in the script that I hold my cat now and say this is Merlin, but he's hiding in the little hole because it's cool and it's really, really warm today, and also the dryer was on earlier and makes a big noise, so he ran away. So I only have pictures of him right now. He does exist. I just can't pick him up right now. But anyway, if you want to help Merlin and the channel, the best thing to do is subscribe to my Patreon, which allows me to fund what I do here, and to also buy toys and scratch pillars and other ridiculous shit for this cat to ignore and just use a cardboard box instead, or the shoelace that I have in my room, or scratch the hell out of my work chair and steal it instead. Truly valuable stuff, and all those in the $5 and up category on Patreon should be scrolling past the screen right now. A bunch of people who I am really grateful towards for helping to make this something akin to a full-time job. A job that I actually like doing and have many, many years worth of content still planned to go for. I'm also looking at setting up a Patreon Discord. I currently have some people putting that together that I am paying and figuring out bot stuff / moderation for it. So if you all want to eventually be able to chat to me in person, or play Magic the Gathering Commander games online with me, or just send me video suggestions, then that would be the place to do that when it finally exists. Otherwise, thank you for watching this video, and I hope you have a great day. Yeah, it sort of really is missing the cat, the whole last bit. But I don't want to drag him out the hole, he likes his hole.